So
Sense.
you don't like making decisions, or you maybe do, and that's why you draw it out so much.
Right. I think I just get caught. I want the options, but then I feel overwhelmed. And it's like, what should I do?
And a fun fact is you and I actually have the same birthday. So I am also Libra
That's
and
right.
Vahi. So I remembered that today when I was preparing for
Yeah,
this interview.
very
So,
cool.
and you mentioned that you're the author of this memoir, When I Was Her Daughter, and we have this available at our library. Now, this memoir talks a lot about relationships with family and talks a lot about mental health. And so, if you're okay with this, I'd love to ask you, in your words, what would you say your book is about?
Sure. My book is about my journey living with my biological mom, who was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and navigating life with her and going through the ups and downs with her episodes and the terrifying things she would say to us and my brother and me and what she would put us through. And then being back and forth, living with her, living on the streets, living with my grandparents, and then going into foster care and having a whole new world that wasn't necessarily better, just different. And, I'm still here and I turned out okay,
Yay!
some will say. So I think that, yeah, I'd like to say the book has a happy ending. I hope that won't spoil it for you. But it is it's a downer for a while because I throw the reader into the reality of what it was like for me being in those conditions. And I tried to capture my emotions and what it was like to be dealing with that as a young girl and then coming of age as a teenager and being in all these different homes and really trying to find out who I was and how I could be lovable because after so much had happened, I was very sad and very depressed.
That's a lot to have processed as any human being. And reading the book, in the beginning of the chapters, you put years and you say how old you were. And so at the beginning of every chapter of this book, people can see, wow, this is an 8-year-old girl that's experiencing this. This is a 7-year-old who had to save her brother from drowning in a swimming pool. And I think I've gotten the dates right.
Yeah, I think so.
But you answered this a little bit. A lot of people who go through something like this, they say, "Well, it's in the past. I'm happy now. Let's let it be past." But writing it, that must have brought up a lot of memories for you. What made you decide to write about it instead of, I don't know, becoming an alcoholic or going and just living your life and not looking back?
I did spend a lot of years trying to live my life and avoiding looking back. And I think that did me more harm than good. On the one hand, again, maybe this is the Libra in me. On the one hand, I think being able to deny what I'd been through allowed me to function on the surface and I was able to cope. However, stuffing all of it down, pretending like it didn't happen, pretending like, oh, I'm okay. Look at me now. I'm fine. That didn't bother me. That wasn't that bad. Everybody has a bad childhood, right? Like that was my mentality. And I started thinking about writing the book because over the course of my life, here and there, people would hear parts of my story when I chose to share, but nobody really knew what I had been through because I seemed like I was this fairly normal person, well adjusted, and nobody would have guessed what I had been through. And people would say to me, you should write a book. And I don't recommend writing a book just because somebody says you should write a book because it is a huge undertaking. And memoir in particular, because it asks you to go back and relive what you experienced so that you can bring an authentic experience to the reader. And it was very challenging. And over many years, from conception to completion and publication was almost 2 decades. So I
Wow.
have been in it, and I wonder if I could have written it faster, would that have helped sooner? Or is this part of the process of going through, taking the time, taking breaks as needed? I was also working full time. I was a full-time English teacher, and I wrote it then because I was already writing it, and then I had to write it. I couldn't have stopped forever and not thought about it and put it in a drawer and just moved on if I tried. It was just nagging at me, and then it just became who I was. I was a person writing this book, and I was going to see it through. And then it became important to me to share my story and hope that it resonates with people, or it makes a difference for them and speaks to them and maybe helps them.
I get this surreal feeling from reading your words, like, is this really happening? Did she really her mom said that to her? Um,
Yeah.
wow. And you do a great job. It feels strange to praise you for writing about your trauma this way, but you do such a great job of really communicating the, is this really happening surrealness, which covers many levels, because on the one hand, your mom had paranoia, had schizophrenia. And so that's a theme through the book of, what is this really what's happening? What is reality? But also, just, you really suck the reader in. And since I mentioned your mom's diagnoses, why do you think that mental health is an important topic to talk about and write about?
I think we could be here all day talking about that. I
I
will try
think
to
you're right
sum
too.
up. Yeah, I will try to sum up that for me, talking about mental health, writing about mental health, spreading awareness about mental health is what helps all of us not only feel better, be better, it helps us understand one another. And in any society, when we can understand more people, we have more compassion, more empathy. I feel like this is conducive to a kind, loving, growing society where people feel their worth, where they feel how they can contribute is important. And to write about it and to speak about it helps those of us who have experienced mental health issues feel safer. And it's an odd thing to think about sharing such a vulnerable aspect, which is stigmatized or looked upon as a bad thing. It's something that we tend to want to hide because we think it makes us look weak or flawed. But we all have flaws. We are very complicated, complex beings. And to write about it, to speak about it, helps unload all of that from the body, from the mind. And Ani, you mentioned, not like how can we go back to the past and write about such horrible things? And we ask, did this really happen? How could this have really happened? One thing writing that book has done for me is it has distanced me from those events in the healthiest way. Before having written and finished the book, I was distanced only by time, but it was still in me and I hadn't processed it. And so I was not healing yet. I was having more health problems and struggling in a lot of ways that now I feel are better because I wrote it, I put it on the page, so now it exists over there and I can move past it for real instead of just because it happened in the past. It's not that I'm trying to avoid thinking about it. It's literally that sometimes I think about some of the things I wrote in the book and wonder, oh, did that happen? I guess that did. When did that happen? Because I'm able to let it go now, that it's not at the forefront of my mind. It's not a burden for me. And it's freed me up in so many ways. And I've had some physical healing, I've had mental healing. And one thing I really encourage anyone to do is to write things down, to get it out, to acknowledge your feelings and to get help where you can.
Thank you so much for saying it as you did. I think something that we can face, especially when we're young and maybe we don't have so many years for distance from our traumas. Like, in my experience, there were some traumas that happened just a couple years ago that I'm still sometimes working through. uh do you have any advice for teenagers specifically? Because teenagers, even if you had perfect circumstances, a perfect family, perfect school settings, it's such a difficult time emotionally. And then if you're also dealing with trauma, or if you're dealing with, even if you don't think it's trauma, just, something that's a hardship of life, do you have any advice for people that would be going through something like that, especially if they were young?
Absolutely. So I mentioned that I was a high school English teacher for many years and worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of teenagers. And it is a hard time. And I think adults, all of the people around the teenagers, forget that being a teenager comes with so many challenges. And adults, because teenagers often look big now, they're tall, they're walking, talking, fully autonomous beings that
Making adult jokes.
making adult jokes, getting into trouble, doing things that make adults angry, whatever it is. And adults forget that teenagers are still new in the world. To be 14, 15, that is so few years to have lived. And too many adults, I think, and many teachers that I worked with sometimes, it seemed like they expected these teenagers to already know everything, to already be experts at everything, and to have it all figured out. And I do think that as a teenager, you need to, first of all, cut yourself some slack and remind yourself that you're still growing and learning, as we all are at any stage in our lives. And to find healthy outlets. For me, I played sports, and I don't know, I shudder to think what it would have been like for me if I didn't have that healthy outlet to every
Hmm.
day force me to run and jump and play. And it was something that I could work to be good at. So if school isn't your thing, if you don't think that you want to be good at school and you don't love it, find something that you love that is healthy, that you can spend time at, that you can kind of compartmentalize so that all the other things that you're dealing with, so that you can kind of put them in a drawer for a while and go play basketball or go draw or work on your, maybe you love to create video games or build other things, or maybe you love to
Hmm.
explore and take photographs, or spend time with friends exploring different parts of your city in a healthy, fun way. I want to emphasize that because it is easy to get pulled into the negative spheres, especially if you're down. You want to just belong. You want to just do something, anything to take your mind off of whatever you're feeling. So I encourage you to write, to be with your thoughts and you have your inner world because it's healthy to get that out of you. And then to have something that you enjoy that you can spend time focusing on for an hour or two a day that gives you a break from all the other stuff. And to know it does get better. This is part of life and it is hard.
Hmm.
It can be hard. So that's okay. And it's just every day. And tomorrow has the opportunity to be better, always.
Can you just walk around with me on my shoulder, please?
Yes,
And,
I'll be right
and just
there.
talk into my ear. We are almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you one more question. If you had to pick only one thing to do for self-care, as we've talked about mental health and being able to compartmentalize and do things that you're good at and do things to release, negative energy or negative experiences that you've had, uh, self-care or self-love is very popular now to talk about. What's something that you do that you love to do for self-care?
I would say, that question seemed to shift a little bit. When you first asked it, I thought, well, exercise, trying to remind myself and be motivated to exercise because getting that bodily stress out is very important. Um, but I also think that part of self-care is getting enough sleep, which I don't always do,
Mm.
and having a writing practice. So where each day you write a little something. And I'm not perfect at it. I'm not perfect at anything. I don't do anything every day except, well, sleep a little bit, eat a lot. Um, and I think
Drink
that having some kind of
coffee.
a routine, yeah, coffee, having a routine is important. And I, I still want to go back to that exercise because so much of those of us who experience trauma, we carry it in our bodies and we have bodily consequences throughout our lives and they get magnified. And
Hmm.
the more we don't exercise or release that and do movement through the body, the harder it becomes to do movement through the body. And when you're young, you don't think about it because moving is easy for you. But to have that as you get older, that healthy outlet, that exercising that helps loosen you up. And for me, if I didn't have a movement routine, I would not be able to function.
All right. Thank you so much for being so honest. And once again, I just want to thank you more than even being honest. Thank you for creating this. Thank you for putting it into the world. Thank you for taking the 20 years of working through all of these really difficult things so that we could read it and see that, oh, I'm not alone. And it doesn't even have to be, if you read it, it doesn't even have to be, wow, I guess my mom's really not that bad, if I can say it in such a crass way. But a lot of times we tend to look at trauma from others and think, oh, well, someone has it worse than I do. But it doesn't have to be a comparison game. This is just another way to show that other people struggle with their relationships with their family too. And like you said, it does get better. And I
Absolutely. Absolutely.
thank you. Um, what I usually say at the end of my school lessons to kids is be kind to yourself and to each other. So I'd like to say that to you as well. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your book, which is available to be checked out at the Ústí Regional Library.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful having this opportunity just to chat with you and to share my book. So I do hope you will read it, and I hope that you'll be able to take something positive from it, and then know that tomorrow is always a chance for a better day.
Yay, thank you.